Prabhu, we couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Very well. Everything good?
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. For some reason, the headphones are not. Okay, thank you so much for joining. We'll start with the Manglacharan. Om Gyan Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Nashtaki. Okay, once again, thank you for joining and happy Dwadashi, at least for me, not sure. I think for you it's already you're already well into the Dwadashi. For me, it's just starting. So we'll resume our discussion from in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, which is titled Narad Muni cursed by Prajapati Daksha. And we did until verse 23 in our previous discussions. So we will resume from verse 24. And the first section of the chapter that we completed was essentially Daksha so in the previous chapter, Daksha did austerities, he recited the Hamsaguhya prayers. Lord Vishnu came, benedicted him with the ability to have many progeny, and Daksha went ahead and married, and he had 10,000 Harishvasas. So the first part of the chapter, the first 22 verses, essentially was Narad Muni preaching to the 10,000 Harishvas, and he preaches using an allegory of the nature of the material world. And the Harishvas, being highly intelligent, understood what the allegory meant, and they gave up the pursuit for dharma, arth, kam, moksha, and they absorbed themselves into pure devotional service and went back to Godhead. So when Daksha heard about it, he lamented very much, almost as if he had lost his children, which from a material perspective he had. But then what happens after that is what we'll begin with from verse 24. Okay. So verse 24, 6:5-24. Sabhuya panchajanyayam ajena prashantivitah putran janyadakshaha swalashwan sahasranaha. When Prajapati Daksha was lamenting for his lost children, Lord Brahma pacified him with instructions. And thereafter, Daksha begot 1,000 more children in the womb of his wife, Panchajani. This time, his sons were known as the Svalashvas. So the previous 10,000 children were known as the Harishvas, and these 1,000 sons are known as the Svalashvas. So the details of the instructions by Brahma to Daksha are not given, but Prabhupada explains that one can understand that both the services of Daksha and Narad are bona fide. So Lord Brahma, also following the instructions of Lord Vishnu, he himself, because is a Prajapati, he had many sons and he instructed them to have more sons. Prajapati Daksha was benedicted specifically by Lord Vishnu to have many progeny. So one can understand that Daksha is not doing anything adharmic. His service is in line with the principles of dharma by the fact that it is endorsed by great personalities like Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu himself. The service by Narad is also bona fide, that he is giving the souls an opportunity to go back to Godhead. In a way, between Daksha and Narad is a microcosm of why the material world is created. That the material world is created so that conditioned souls take birth in it in order to further their material desires. But also, here they have an opportunity to make spiritual advancements and go back to Godhead. So Daksha was in charge of the ingestion, that he was giving the conditioned souls an opportunity to enter into the material world, to take various bodies according to their desires, to further their material proclivities. And while they are in the material world, Narad was playing the role of giving them an opportunity to perfect their existence and exist the material world. So even though the services appear to be contradictory, they're actually both aligning to the overall desire of Lord Vishnu. That's why he created the material universe. So Prabhupada would give the example that in the temple, the accounting department, its purpose is to save money. So they have to look for opportunities to do more with less. And the purpose of the preaching department is to spend money. Right? So I remember when I was on the temple board, we would have this very heated debates about how to handle Lakshmi. And sometimes Prabhupada quotes were one quote at one end. Prabhupada once famously quoted that the temple should be a temple should earn $1 million and spend $1 million. Right? So that was used a lot in the context of temple administration. Right, but essentially what Prabhupada said, that you earn $1 million and you spend it in preaching. The business of the temple is is preaching. It's not that you earn $1 million and then you use it for whatever, for non-preaching purposes, right? So, but both the departments are, if they're properly situated, the accounting department is saving money so that the preaching department can spend money. The accounting department should not think that these preaching department are spending money, so we should also spend money, or vice versa. Right? Once Prabhupada criticized a sannyasi who was a little careful in spending money, and he said something to the effect that don't be envious. Make sure that you let go, you spend the money as much as as much as possible. So this is also why there is conflict between Daksha and Narad, because Daksha does not have a clear understanding of how the services align. So when Narad liberated the 10,000 sons of Daksha, then Daksha should have been there thanking Narad, saying that I did my service, you did your service, perfect. But he considers his service to be more important than that of Narad. Right? So when there is this lack of overall understanding of how one is serving the Lord, the conflict arises. So Srila Prabhupada writes that Daksha is expert in begetting children and Narad is expert in delivering. Therefore, materialistic experts do not agree with the spiritual experts. But this does not mean that Narad Muni will give up his engagement of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Okay, verse 25. Ticha pitra samadhishta praja sarge drita vritaha Narayana sarojagmur yatra siddha swapurvajaha. In accordance with the father's order to beget children, the second group of sons also went to Narayan Saras, the same place where the brothers had previously attained perfection by following the instructions of Narada. Undertaking great vows of austerity, the Salvashvas remained at that holy place. So the 1,000 Shavalashvas followed their elder 10,000 brothers and went to the Narayan Saras to perform austerities. Now, one may wonder that if Daksha knew that this was a place where they could be so-called attacked, why did he send them to the same place? Or why did they send them at all? He would have simply said that, okay, now my 1,000 sons, you marry and start having progeny. So Srila Prabhupada notes that while Daksha may not have the big spiritual picture, he was firm in following the rules and regulations of the scriptures. And so Daksha is not an ordinary person, right? He's the son of Brahma. He is a Prajapati who has a position that is much, much higher than even the demigods. So not an ordinary person. And one does not acquire such position by neglecting the Vedas. So he had a very strong desire to himself and his sons follow the scriptural injunctions, and the injunctions clearly state that before entering to Grahastha ashram, before becoming a father, the sons should be purified. Daksha had followed the same process himself, and he had also had the elder sons follow the same process. Now he wants the Sabalashvas also to follow the same process. Now, part of the process also is that it is up to the sons to make a decision as to how they would like to move into their life. So we see that Daksha is creating opportunities, but he is not mandating them. And sometimes, and this is a criticism more for Indian parents, that they essentially take away choices and force the children into certain paths. But we see that that's not the Vedic way. That Daksha, he could have simply ordered his children to marry and have progeny. But instead, what he says is, go through the purification process and then move on to the next steps. And so the point that is making is that after you're purified, then you decide. Now, Daksha, of course, had very strong preferences, but he is not imposing them on the children. We also see the difference between how Daksha and Narad deal with loss. So, in the where did we see this? In the fifth canto, we saw that when Narad Muni was preaching to Priyavrata, so he was preaching to Priyavrata his bhakti doctrine of giving up everything, and for a while the preaching was working because Priyavrata was the older son of Swambhavu Manu, and he gave up his claim to the kingdom. His younger brother Maharaj Utanpad ascended the throne. But when Utanpad, by the influence of Dhruva Maharaj, he gave up his kingdom, then Narad knew that the focus would be back to Priyavrata. So Narad quickly went to Priyavrata and began to preach to him about the futility of this whole material engagement. And while he was preaching, Brahma came. So Swambhavu Manu was smart enough to understand that he would not be able to counter the preaching potency of Narad Muni. So Manu goes to Brahma, Brahma comes and Brahma preaches to Priyavrata. And of course, Brahma is Brahma, so Priyavrata agrees to the proposal of Brahma, essentially rejecting the proposal of Narad Muni. So we see that Priyavrata after that marries, he ascends, he takes on the role, and then he rules for a very, very long time. But Narad, he accepted it graciously. And he himself congratulates Priyavrata. He agrees that the universe needs a competent administrator. So he is able to see the big picture, but not Daksha. Right? So we see that Daksha was initially he was completely devastated with sorrow when his elder 10,000 sons went, and later on we'll see that he becomes very angry with Narad Muni. Right? So there's a difference between the ability to deal with adversities, so-called adversities, between Narad and Daksha. In terms of the father's duty, Prabhupada writes that it's the duty of the father to give cultural education to the son, who must later decide which way to go. Responsible fathers should not hinder their sons who are making cultural advancement in association with Krishna consciousness movement. This is not a father's duty. The duty of a father is to give the son complete freedom to make his choice after becoming spiritually advanced. And Prabhupada, being an acharya, he also demonstrated it. Right? So he himself, it's a little ironical. The Prabhupada made so many devotees, but he was not able to make his own sons devotees. He was not able to make his own wife a devotee. His eldest son, Vrindavan Chandradev, was, I guess, he was favorable, very favorable, but some of his other sons were actually antagonistic, and his wife was openly antagonistic. So Prabhupada did not impose anything. So similarly, here Prabhupada, of course, is talking about on the positive end, that when young men were joining the movement, the mothers and the fathers would get very upset. And that's going on even today, even to this days, especially in India. Whenever I'm visiting India, definitely somebody or else will come to me and say, ISKCON stole my son, or ISKCON stole my son-in-law, or something like that. So the Prabhupada makes this point that the duty of the father is to instill the proper values and then let the child make the right decision. Okay, let's move on to verse 26. Tadupasparshanadeva vinirduta malashayah japanto brahma paramam tepastatra mahattapaha. At Narayan Saras, the second group of the sons performed penances in the same way as the first. They bathed in the holy water, and by its touch all the dirty material desires in their hearts were cleansed away. They murmured mantras beginning with Omkar and underwent a severe course of austerities. So the process that was followed by the elder sons was bona fide, so the younger sons also followed the same process. And so by bathing in the holy water, the material desires in their hearts were cleansed away. So right now we are in India. It's almost the concluding week of Prayag, the Kumbh Mela in Prayag Kshetra. And I think they're expecting, by the time it ends, they're expecting about 700 million people to have taken a bath, about close to about half the population of India. And as usual, there's a lot of debates going on about whether taking a bath in the water, what is the effect that it has, it is actually worth it. I think the cost to the or the impact in the economy is exceeding, at this point is exceeding almost 2,500 crores. So the understanding is that these things are transcendental. That when one takes a bath with faith, then the benedictions accrued to them in accordance with what is stipulated. So here the waters of the Narayan Sharas were famous for purifying material desires. And because they took bath with faith, it is mentioned here that the dirty material desires were cleansed away. And then they chanted mantras beginning with the Omkar. Srila Prabhupada comments on this part of the verse, saying that the Vedic mantras, they are typically preceded by the Omkar, also the Brahmakshar. For example, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And Prabhupada quotes Krishna and Bhagavad Gita that Pranava Sarva Vedeshu. Where in all the Vedic mantras, I am represented by the Pranav or the Omkar. So when one chants Omkar, Om, then one is invoking the presence of the Lord. So whatever is chanting followed by the Omkar is now chanted in context with the prior invocation. So it's like saying Om, which means that Krishna, and then you basically say Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, right? So I'm offering my obeisances unto you, who is the son of Vasudeva. Then Prabhupada further states that the traditional Vedas, they prohibit the chanting of the Omkar to those who are not qualified. Right? So what does qualification mean? That one who has taken Brahman Diksha, one who is living the life strictly Brahminical life, following the regulative principles, one who has received the mantra in the parampara. So all these qualifications, when they are there, then one becomes qualified to chant the Om mantra, which is what we see in ourselves also, that we get the Gayatri mantra after a certain period, right? When you're strictly following the regulative principles, you're strictly adhering to the principles of Bhakti, etc. Then the Guru Maharaj, he gives you the Gayatri mantra. Before that, you're not supposed to chant the Gayatri mantra. But then Prabhupada notes that Mahaprabhu, he, out of his compassion, he made an exception for the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That even though the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it has all the potency of any Vedic mantra. Prabhupada says there's no difference between Hare Krishna and the Vedic mantras beginning with Omkar. And in fact, there is a difference in the sense that the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is more potent. But at the minimum, there is no difference. But it does not have the preceding Om, which would attract the objections of the Smarta Brahmins, that how come you're chanting it in the streets? How come you're chanting it giving it to people who are not qualified? So everybody is recommended to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Yeah. Verse 27, 28. अभक्षः कतिचिन्मासान् कतिचिद्वायुभोजनः आराध्यन् मन्त्रमिमम् अभ्यस्यन्तैदष्पतिम् ॐ नमो नारायण पुरुषाय महात्मने विशुद्धसत्त्वधिष्णाय महाहिंसाय धीमहि. For a few months, the sons of Prajapati Daksha drank only water and ate only air. Thus, undergoing severe austerities, they recited this mantra. Let us offer a respectful obeisance to Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always situated in his transcendental abode. Since he is the Supreme Person, Paramhamsa, let us offer a respectful obeisances unto him. So, the mantras that were chanted by the Swalashvas is given here. Right? So, the Mool mantra in this is Om Namo Narayana. Right? And this is also the mantra that is chanted by the Sri Vaishnavas. So, just like the Madhavas or the Gaudiya Madhavas, they chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The Sri Vaishnavas, they chant the mantra Om Namo Narayana. So when they chant on the beads, this is the mantra that they chant Om Namo Narayana. So the mantra was actually given to Sripad Ramunidacharya by his guru, Sripad Goshtipurna. So in the biography of Ramanacharya, it is mentioned that that Ramanacharya was very much taken by the transcendental ecstasy of his guru. Now, Ramanacharya accepted many gurus; these were all Shiksha gurus. So he was very much enamored by Sripad Goshtipurna, and he would keep going to him and asking him that if you can give me the mantra that you chant that is giving you so much spiritual ecstasy. And Goshtipurna would say that we are not qualified. He would refuse. So 17 times Ramanacharya went to Goshtipurna and 17 times he refused. So the 18th time when Ramanacharya went, he said that if you refuse me this time, I will give up my body. I will climb up a cliff and jump down from there, and that will be the end. So Goshtipurna said that now I know that you are ready to receive the mantra because you value it more than your own life. So then he chanted, before giving him the mantra, he said, but there is one condition under which I will give you this mantra. And the condition is that do not reveal this to anybody else. If you reveal it, then your spiritual life will be destroyed and you will rot in hell for eternity. So Ramanacharya promised. And then Goshtipurna, he gave him the mantra. So when Ramanacharya, he began to chant the mantra, he began to feel this extreme spiritual ecstasy. And within a few minutes, he actually went right against the promise and instruction of his Guru Maharaj. So he climbed up a mountain cliff, and then he started shouting that, come, I have something very special to reveal to all of you. And because he was already a great personality, hundreds and thousands of people congregated. And then he gave them this mantra, Om Namo Narayana. He said, all of you chant with me. And when people were chanting, they were all experiencing spiritual ecstasy. So when Goshtipurna found out about it, he was furious. So he summoned Ramanacharya and he said that you didn't even wait for a day. As soon as you took the mantra, you gave it. And after making this promise to me, to your own guru, so do you know the consequences of it? And then Ramachari folded his hand and he said that by chanting this mantra, I understood that this is the way back to Godhead. And then when I was walking back, I saw all these hundreds and thousands of conditioned souls around me who had no way to escape this prison, who would continuously for lifetimes after lifetimes suffer. So I thought that better for me to suffer than them. So I am prepared to spend eternity in hell if it helps the others to escape this material hell. So, Goshti Purna, of course, he was very happy to see the strong compassion. And it's noted, Prabhupada also notes that that's the nature of a Vaishnava, that they're willing to suffer hell just in order to help others. In this particular verse, Prabhupada also notes that the Svalashvas, they followed the Vedic tradition of purifying themselves by strictly following the process of as given in the Vedas. So Prabhupada said that one must undergo some austerity by giving up four unwanted principles, namely illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. Anyone can easily practice this tapasya and then chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And then Prabhupada talks in terms of bathing, that if possible, one should bathe in the waters of Ganges or Yamuna. Or in the absence of Ganges and Yamuna, one may bathe in the water of the sea. This is an item of austerity. Our Krishna conscious movement has therefore established two very large centers, one in Vrindavan and the other in Mayapur, Navadvip. One may bathe in the Ganges or Yamuna. So in Vrindavan is, of course, on the bank of Yamuna, and Mayapur is on the bank of Jalangi, Ganges river. Okay, moving on to verse 29. Ititanapi Rajendra Praja Sargadiyo Munihi Upetya Narada Praha Vachaha Kutani Purvava. O King Parikshit, Narad Muni approached the sons of Prajapati Daksha, who were engaged in tapasya to beget children, and spoke enigmatic words to them, just as he had spoken to their elder brothers. So, the preaching of Narad Muni is given in summary over here, but we also see some aspects of what Prabhupada calls as transcendental cunningness from the perspective of effective preaching. So, Narad Muni does not intercept them right as soon as they enter into Narayan Suras. He waits for them to take a bath and spend several months reciting various Vedic mantras, performing austerities. So even though bhakti is independent of any material considerations, but piety is definitely something that is an enabler, a catalyst for bhakti. So the activities that were being performed by the Svalashvas was purificatory activities. And Narad Muni understanding that once material desires are away, once the heart's been purified by the performance of austerities as recommended in the scriptures, the seed of bhakti is easier to plant. So in transcendental cunningness, he waits for them. Now, he also approaches them at this point because if he had waited more, then they would have embarked on their next stage of life, which is then having progeny, and then it would be too late. So he is timing his approach perfectly. Next verse 30. Excuse me. दाक्षयान संशृणुता गदतो निगमं मम अनिच्छातु न तु अनिच्छा अनिच्छतनानुपद्विम भरात् भ्रातॄणां भ्रातर्वत्सलः. O sons of Daksha, please hear my words of instructions attentively. You are all very affectionate to your elder brothers, the Harishvas. Therefore, you should follow their path. Okay, so now this is the second transcendental trick that is being used by Narad Muni. So he not only preaches to them the tattva, but he is also invoking family affection. Right? So if you notice, he invokes two relationships of the Savalashvas. Firstly, he calls them as sons of Daksha. Right? And by doing that, he is reminding them of the duty to their father, which is to have progeny. But then he's talking about the affection to their elder brothers, the Harishvas. So he's saying that just like you had affection for your father, the Harishvas, your elder brothers, also had affection for their father or your father. But they followed a path that was different from what was instructed by Daksha. And because you're affectionate to them, you should also follow their path. So Prabhupada notes that family affection is very strong. Narad Muni followed this tactic of reminding them of the family relationship with the Harishvashas. Generally, the word Nigam refers to the Vedas, but here Nigam refers to the instructions contained in the Vedas. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Nigamakalpatarur galitam phalam. Narad Muni is engaged in distributing this fruit. Therefore, he instructed Vyasadeva to write the Mahapuran, Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, verse 31. Bhratranam prayanam prathaya nutishanti dharmavit sapunnabandhu purusho marudyapi sahamodate. A brother, aware of the principles of religion, follow in the footsteps of his elder brothers. Because of being highly elevated, such a pious brother gets the opportunity to associate and enjoy with demigods like Maruts, who are all affectionate to their brothers. So we see that Narad continues to exploit their affection for their elder brothers. Right? Again, built into this affection is also the negation of the orders of Daksha. And so Narad Muni is essentially saying, just like your brothers who were properly situated neglected the instructions of their father, you should do the same. Right? And he's saying that Prabhupada says that one who is very faithful to his brothers should follow a path similar to theirs and get an opportunity for promotion to Marudlok. Narad Muni advised Prajapati Daksha's second group of sons to do the same. So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that when Narad Muni is saying that they will get elevated to the to become associates of the Maruts, he is using it as an example, as an instance. So factually, the Harishvas, they went to Vaikuntha. Right? And Narad Muni wants the Spalashvas to go to the same destination. As sons of Daksha, they're already at a level that is equal to or higher than the Maruts. So it's not much of an enticement for them. But nevertheless, Narad Muni using it as an example to demonstrate the potency of following your elder brother. Verse 32. Ekadvaduktva prayayo nardo mogadarshanaha tepi chan bhagavam margam pratranameva marisha. Sukadeva Goswami said, O best of the Aryans, after saying this much to the sons of Prajapati Daksh, Narad Muni, whose merciful glance never goes in vain, left as he had planned. The sons of Daksha, followed their elder brothers, not attempting to produce children, they engaged themselves in Krishna consciousness. So the preaching to the Svalashvas had the same effect as with the Harishvas. Right? And Sukadeva Goswami talks about the mercy of the devotee. He says that this was primarily because of Amog Darshana. So Amog Darshana, you can understand it in two ways, that Prabhupada translates it as, so merciful glance, right? All auspicious glance. Also means having darshan of Narad Muni. Seeing a devotee, especially a pure devotee, that itself never goes in vain. But here also, more so in the context of, because Narad Muni actively preached to them, one can understand that he was giving them his own personal mercy. And Sukadeva Goswami here says that's the reason they went back. It's acknowledging the potency of the mercy of a devotee. So Vishnu Chakravarti says, even forget about the auspicious glance. Even the angry glance of a devotee can liberate. And he gives the example of Nalkuber. The Narad Muni glanced angrily at them and cursed them. And while they may have stayed as trees for a long time, eventually they got darshan of Krishna. It said that the Arjun trees, they were really fortunate because they were in the backyard of Mother Yashoda. So they were witnessing all the childhood pastimes of Krishna. Things that even demigods like Shiva and Brahma were aspiring to do, they were right there in the backyard. And they were witnessing all that. All this by the mercy of Narad Muni. So even the angry glance of a devotee is auspicious. What to speak about a merciful glance. Verse 33. Sadrichinam pratichinam parasyanupatham gataha nadyapite nivartante paschyamayaminiva. The Svalashvas took to the correct path, which is obtainable by a mode of life meant to achieve devotional service or the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like night, they have gone to the west. They have not returned even until now. And so a little bit of poetic metaphor over here, that just as when the night returns, it does not come back, the sons of the 1,000 Savalashvas, they went to the spiritual world, never to return. This also indicates that Krishna's affection for his devotees, right? So earlier Krishna had benedicted Daksha to have progeny as his duty as a Prajapati. But then Narad Muni, he came and he he his own desire seemed to be contrary to the desire of Krishna. So Krishna had said, Vishnu had said, "You are a Prajapati, go forth and have multiply, create more offsprings, and thereby populate the universe." Right? So that was Lord Vishnu's benediction. Now Narad Muni comes and is interfering with the desire of Krishna. So instead of standing aside while Daksha fulfilled his service of having more children and children having more children, the Narad Muni, he takes them back to Godhead. But there is no adverse consequences to Narad Muni. So this talks about the superiority of bhakti to all other paths. This talks about the great affection that the Lord has for his devotees compared to everyone else. And this talks about how the Lord is happy to fulfill the desires of his devotees, even if they seem to contradict his own desires. Okay. So next verse we'll do, and then we'll stop for any discussion. After, let me see, because after that is the we'll do a couple of verses, because after that is the concluding part of the chapter, which is the cursing of Nagmani by Daksha. So we'll do two more verses. Verse 33. Sadrichinam pratichinam. No, this one we did. Verse 33, verse 34. Etasmin kalupatana bahun pashyam prajapatihi purvavannarada kritam putranasham upashruno. At this time, Prajapati Daksha observed many inauspicious signs, and he heard from various sources that his second group of sons, the Swalashvas, had followed the path of the elder brothers in accordance with the instructions of Narada. So a little bit of context over here. When it is said inauspicious signs, it means that they were inauspicious for Daksha, based on his mentality. It's like if there is a merchant who is very much invested into earning money, and if there's a transaction that may cause him loss of money, that is inauspicious for him. For a Brahmana, there is no inauspiciousness in that. Whether he makes money, he is completely indifferent to it. But for a Vaishya, if he loses money, it's very inauspicious there. So similarly, Prajapati Daksha, because he was materially absorbed, the fact that his second son of sons also acquired liberation was inauspicious. Now, for a devotee seeing their children going back to Godhead, there's nothing better than that. And even from the perspective of the universe, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it's mentioned how when a soul goes back to Godhead, then there is celebrations everywhere. And the demigods, the rishis, the residents of the higher four planetary system, as the soul makes its way to the various levels of the universe, outside the material coverings of the universe, everywhere there is happiness, there is congratulation, there is auspiciousness over there. Radha Govind Maharaj makes this point that it's a little different, like when a soul gets elevated to a heavenly planet, then the residents of the heavenly planets are not very happy. And, he says there's one more person coming in. We have to share our opulence with the person. We have to compete with the person. So they're not really happy. But the same devas, when they see that Jiva is going back to Godhead, they're happy. They play the bugles, they sound the drums. So in the universe there was happiness that the 11,000 sons of Daksha had gone back to Godhead, but for Daksha it was considered to be inauspicious. Yeah. Verse 35. Chukrodhanardasau putrashokha vimurchitaha devarshim upalabhyaya roshad vishpuritadharaha. When he heard that the Savalashvas had also left this world to engage in devotional service, Daksha was angry at Narad, and he almost fainted due to lamentation. When Daksha met Narad, Daksha's lip began trembling in anger, and he spoke as follows. So, Srila Prabhupada in the purport quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about how Narad Muni had delivered the entire family of Swambhavu Manu. Family in the sense the dynasty, the lineage. So, beginning with Priyavarta, then Utanpad, then Maharaj Dhruva, then Prachinabhari. So he had a very affectionate relationship with the dynasty of Swambhavu Manu. So the one of the questions over here is that how did this conversation between Daksha and Narad happen? So it says when Daksha met Narad, right? So the Vishnu Chakravarti gives the understanding that what it means is that Narad came personally to meet Daksha. So why would Narad come to meet Daksha knowing that Daksha was angry at him? So Narad was definitely not of that mentality that he came to gloat over Daksha and came to belittle him in any ways. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad says that Daksha came, Narad Muni came because he saw an opportunity to deliver Daksha. So in the fourth canto, at the end, we had seen that Narad Muni had preached to the Prachetas. And because of the preaching, so it was a very similar situation. The King Prachinabhari, he had instructed, who himself was a very big Karmakandi, very much like Daksha, and he had the 10 Prachetas, and he said, you go and perform austerities and purify yourself to have children. So the Prachetas had gone, and Narad Muni intercepted the Prachetas. He preached to them, and then Lord Shiva came and gave them the stotra for glorified Lord Vishnu. And then after that, Narad Muni, he quickly goes to Prachinabhari to inform him that this is what has happened, that I preached to your sons and now they are performing devotional service. And Prachinabhari, he was initially bewildered, saying that because he was so much a Karmakandi himself, that it was mentioned that even before one yagya was over, he would start another yagya. But then Narad Muni was able to use that opportunity to preach to Prachinabhari, the famous metaphorical story that he tells him. And then Prachinabhari listens to Narad and he himself becomes liberated. So in the same mood, Narad Muni is saying that now Daksha, so it's saying he's almost fainting due to lamentation because of the loss of his sons. This is a good time for me to go and preach to him. Because when one, Prabhupada says that at the time of bereavement is a suitable time for appreciating Bhakti Yoga. Right? So he quotes 716 that there are 4 kinds of people, Artha, Arthati, Jigyasu, and Jnani. So Daksha falls in the first category, Artha, that he is distressed. The 4 kinds of people take to devotional service. So because Daksha was in great distress, at the loss of his sons, Nad Muni was using this as an opportunity. Now, in verse 32, Sukadev Goswami had glorified Narad as Narado Moga Darshana, that one whose merciful glance never goes in vain. But we will see that his merciful glance does go in vain in the context of Daksha. So not only is he unsuccessful in guiding Daksha towards bhakti, he actually pushes Daksha to a path of Vaishnava Prad, which is essentially the opposite of bhakti. So how do we reconcile these two? So the understanding is that the mercy of the devotees initially is indeed amogha. It is indeed invincible. However, the mercy needs to be taken. Right? It said that Krishna consciousness cannot be given. It has to be taken. Spirituality has to be caught. So what the devotees do is they give this opportunity. They throw bhakti out. And they throw it out as indiscriminately as possible, as widely as possible. Like sometimes when we see there are big crowds and there is some big sadhu or guru is coming and is throwing the flowers out or is throwing something prasadam out, and some people will neglect it, it just falls to the ground, they'll step on it and go away. But some people will actually catch it. Right? So the same way with Krishna consciousness. It cannot be taught, it has to be caught. Right? It cannot be given, it has to be taken. So while there is the desire of Krishna, while there is the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, while there is the empowerment of Vaishnavacharyas in the parampara, and gurus like Srila Prabhupada, that everyone should become Krishna consciousness, should become Krishna conscious, all that is doing is increasing the opportunities that are available to the people to take to Krishna consciousness. Sometimes fathers lament that, my children, my son or daughter did not take to it because even though they grew up in a devotee house, but we were lacking. But actually it is the desire of every individual jiva. And based on the desire, they will either take it or not. So we see that here, the same Narad who was able to preach to Prachina Bari, to so many personalities, to the sons of Daksha, we see that he fails in preaching to Daksha. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the beautiful class. Actually, I was having a question and I think you answered that. Like I was thinking why, any specific reason why Narada Muni is so merciful to, like Daksha's children. But from the, after towards the end of the break, you explained how Narada Muni is kind to so many different personalities. So I think it is causeless mercy. Other than that, there is no antecedents or why this specifically these sets of children of Daksha are chosen. Is that understanding right, Prabhuji?
It's right. It's Daksha giving Krishna consciousness wherever he can, whenever he can.
Prabhuji, one more question. As you brought that topic of Mahakumbh, uh, so why Mahakumbh is so famous, Prabhuji? Like famous, or why it is so? Is it so? Why is it so special? And also, is there any difference in the transcendental benefit one get for people who take it with faith and or not so much faith? Because assuming there will be some faith who are taking efforts to go there, definitely. So just wanted to hear about Mahakumbh or generally Kumbh Mela too.
So the potency is mostly because of it's mostly because of astrological alignment of planets, right? And mostly with the path of Jupiter. So Jupiter completes one revolution in 12 years. That's why the Kumbh comes once in every 12 years. So in every 12 years, it takes a particular position with respect to the Earth planet that is considered to be very auspicious. The definition of auspiciousness kind of changes depending on the people who are going. Some people auspiciousness is um, freedom from material diseases. For some people, it is getting wealth. For some people, it's making spiritual advancement. That definition is a little bit subjective to with the faith with which the person is taking bath. This particular is Kumbh is called Mahakumbh because it happens once in 144 years, 12 cycles of 12, where not only Jupiter but some of the other planets also they align themselves. And again, it's an astronomical kind of a thing. They align themselves, and they create. In terms of the Puranic significance, uh, so as you know, there was the Sagar Manthan, and the Amrit was taken from the ocean. And then initially there was a little bit of a battle between the Asuras, and the Asuras from they snatched it from Dhanvantari. So then it is said that a few drops of that Amrit dropped into the ocean. And because of the planetary configuration, in 12 years, that path for the Amrit, it opens. So people who take bath are essentially taking bath in the nectar that was extracted from the Samudra Manthan. So they get liberation. So these are the moksha kamis. They take bath with their understanding that they're having access to the nectar and they get liberation, or they will get bodies like the demigods, which are strong and invincible, etc. Faith, of course, is always very important. You know, if somebody takes bath, um, without faith, there will be effect, but the effect is more or less commensurate with the faith with which one takes bath, right? So even when we see in terms of the chanting of the holy name, when we say that bhakti is independent, but taking the holy name without faith is considered effective, because then it allows one to take the holy name with faith. And we saw that in the pastime of Ajamel, that while he took the name without faith, but when the second chance was given to him, he took the name with faith, and that's how he got liberated. Right. So faith is always a very important component in terms of what is the benefit that you get from the engagement.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And I heard that you are also been to Mahakumbh. So congratulations, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Actually, about Daksha, it is normal that he react like that because he has a goal, and his goal has been hampered by Narad Muni. And I think it's normal. But you said that he could not get the benediction of Narad because he could not overcome that. I've seen also in devotees' life, like somebody joined the temple when the parent come. I've seen it myself a few times in Mauritius when I was there. I was staying in the temple at that time, not staying full time, but during the school holidays. I was still young, and when the parent came to, they come to drag their son out of the temple in a way, but the son, if you are like after 18, the son can do whatever they want to do. They can't, but some literally cry and curse also. And but later, I've seen same parent, they became devotee after, after maybe 10 years or 5 years or whatever. I've seen few families like that, where they were completely averse to the devotees, and then they finally become devotees themselves. They're chanting, and some even took initiation after.
There were a lot of cases where there was initial. I think a lot of it depends on and this I'm speaking not so much from philosophical perspective, but just practical perspective. It depends on the emotional maturity of the person who took to Krishna consciousness. Sometimes when young people take to Krishna consciousness, they take to it in a fanatical way, which means that they tend to reject a lot prematurely. But I was speaking to one young man over here. Um, he did engineering from a very good school. He was ready to start work, and then met devotees, moved into the ashram, which was all good. But then he basically took to it in a very fanatical way. Right? He cut all contacts with his family. He refused to answer to his original name and refused to meet his mother. And they became more and more fanatic. They became more and more concerned. And the situation devolved. And finally, it did not end in a good place. Even this person left the temple, he left the ashram. Right now, he's at neither places, neither with the ashram nor with his family. Everybody is unhappy. The temple is not happy that he left. He's not happy because he doesn't have a bearing. The family is unhappy that they've lost at least I think they've lost their son. So I think people, young men or women who have more emotional um, intelligence, they're able to, like you're saying, they're able to ease themselves into Krishna consciousness, ease their family into it. Prabhupada would make sure that devotees continue to respect their parents. There's a famous case of, I think it was Brahmanand Maharaj, and this was in 26 Second Avenue, and uh, his mother came to meet Prabhupada, right? And Prabhupada immediately asked Brahmanand, "Go and you touch her feet." And firstly, it's not there in in American culture. And secondly, Brahmanand was she's karmi, she eats meat and all that. And Prabhupada says, no, she's your mother. And it did have the desired effect. She came to fight with Prabhupada, and she left giving a donation to to Prabhupada. She was very happy, very proud. Both two of her sons, Gargmuni and Brahmanand, they both joined the movement. Right. So a lot depends on the emotional maturity of the person who takes to it, and it can lead to a welcome outcome, as you were noting that the child matures himself, and the family also becomes more and more affectionate, more and more favorable to it.
Prabhu, I think this is something I think we should warn, especially new devotees, even now, not even full-time devotee, those that just started to practice. The PDS syndrome, pure devotee syndrome. In the beginning, they think that while they start to chant, they read, they meet devotees, they think that they feel that they're getting purified, and feel that they're getting more, becoming more saintly, and then they think very soon maybe they will become like a saint, and then they see everybody low, even their family, their brother, their sister. I think this creates a lot of problem. I've seen it here also, where it creates problem between husband and wife also. because wife is going faster than the husband, and the husband cannot follow, and it create problem with the kids. I think this is something that we should emphasize while, especially in Bhakti Vrikshas and things like that, that you have to be very, very careful because it can create problem in a couple, between friend, between friend, between parent and children, things like that. I think we should warn these people, be careful.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. There's more awareness of this also happening now. So in the more formal program, like the new devotee program, etc., there is a lot of focus on this aspect now of not rejecting things prematurely, and gurus, they're counseling the disciples in the same way. Right, because I also had the same struggle. This is many years ago, of course, but I had the same struggle where, especially my mother was very much averse to Krishna consciousness and ISKCON per se, more to ISKCON than to Krishna consciousness, and it was a cause of anxiety to me. And I remember Guru Maharaj once telling me that you should act in a way that increases the Krishna consciousness, and does not always mean that you have to preach to her. Because we were having a lot of discussions. We are still very close, so we would talk a lot, and I would quote from the Bhagavad Gita and Srila Prabhupada, and uh, because of course my position and her position, I mean, not only was she not accepting it, but she was becoming more and more resentful of Srila Prabhupada. She became more and more disrespectful of Prabhupada and ISKCON per se. And I was kind of what to do, break off relationship. And I remember Guru Maharaj counseling me that not everybody will become a devotee, and not everybody needs to be preached to. You can act in a way that increases. And then that was the conscious change I made, that instead of preaching explicitly, I said, you do your thing and I do my thing. And it did work. I mean, I don't think she'll ever be a devotee. I mean, she does not have that strong faith in Krishna. But she at least has a lot of respect for me. Like when I'm visiting her, she makes sure there's no onion garlic in the house. She's completely accepting the fact that I have to spend 2 hours chanting, deity worship, etc. So she understands that the schedule of the house has to be now kind of modified to adapt to it. She doesn't resent the fact that, things have to wait for my chanting to finish, etc. So, at least she's favorable from being resentful. And I think in ISKCON as a whole, as you were mentioning, there is more and more recognition of this, and you're right. It should be more and more explicitly stated, especially for young devotees. It should be more explicitly, especially in India, where family ties are very, very strong. Or Indian families rather. And it should be more. There should be more deliberate acknowledgement of the fact that it could create strains in family lives, and how to address them.
I will just, it make me smile or laugh, whatever. There are some devotees, as they are getting, okay, let's say, progress in their spiritual life, they say that as soon as my kid goes to college, I'm leaving home, I'm going to live in the dam. And then the husband was looking at me saying, actually, we are the cause of that, because we were preaching and they became devotee. And, they feel like, then I talked to them. I said to the lady, you have to be careful what you say. You cannot say things like that. Instead of making your husband a devotee, now you're pushing him more away. You have to be careful. Do you want your husband to be a devotee, or you want him to go away? It's not the way you should talk as well. Maybe you're thinking like that now. Maybe maybe 5-6 years, you will not think like that. Now you're like a pure devotee. They think that they're pure devotee. I cannot live in this world. I cannot work. I cannot live in this house. I cannot do this. I cannot do that. Anyway, this is a constant battle.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Prabhu. So moving on to the next set of verses. So these set of verses are essentially the criticism slash cursing of Narad Muni by Daksha. Verse 36. Sri Dakshuvacha Aho Ashadu Sadhunam Sadhulingena Nastvaya Asadvakaya Arabhakanam Vikshurmaga Pradashtitaha. Prajapati Daksh said, Alas, Narad Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you're not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grahastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. So 36 to 44, which takes us to the end of the chapter, is Daksha's criticism and cursing of Narad Muni. Right. Now, these verses, they so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he delves a little deeply into the verses to show a little bit about the mood of Daksha. Right. So Daksha says that we are saintly. So he uses the plural out of pride. Right. And then what does he say? By wearing the dress of a saintly person, you are causing great deception. You have produced great misfortune to me, who would never show such hatred for you, even in dreams. So Daksha is setting the stage of the mood of a material person over here. Right. So begins with pride. And essentially, you will see that Daksha is only absorbed about himself. Right? Contrary to what Narad Muni is thinking of others, Daksha is only thinking about himself. That poor me, I am such a great person, I am such a wrong person, I am such a respected person. So it's all I. And because of this obsession with I, comes a lot of pride and suffering. So here he is complaining that you have created misfortune for me. So Narad might say, what injustice have I done to you? Right. So which Chakravarti Pad says that Daksha says that with envy, you were not able to tolerate the happiness of my household life. Right. So what Daksha is saying that you don't have a household life, so you're envious of those who have household life. And because you're envious of them, you try to destroy their household life. Dharma said, how? He said, you took my small innocent children. Your asadva karya arbhakam. You brainwash them and you convince them to accept the teachings of a cheater like you. So Narad Muni would say that what did I convince them of? Daksha says bhikshur. Bhikshur is the path of renunciation. Literally, it means to live by begging. So it is meant for the Brahman brahmachari and the Brahman sannyas. Right? These two varnashrams. So either a Brahman at the stage of brahmachari or a Brahman at the stage of sannyas is expected to live by bhikshur. So Daksha says that I am a king. My sons were Kshatriyas. it is not suitable for them to engage in the path of Bhikshur Marga Pradarshita, that it is not suitable for them to take to that path. Right, so this is Daksha's opening shot to Narad Muni. Now, Vishnu Chakravarti also gives the Saraswat Artha. Right, so Saraswat Artha. So if you remember in the in the in the in the fourth canto, where Daksha he criticizes Lord Shiva, then the Acharyas they also extract the Saraswat Artha, where all the criticism is actually understood to be glorification. And similarly, when we see that Shishupal is criticizing Krishna, then we see that the Saraswat Artha is Shishupal is actually praising Krishna. So here also Daksha's criticism, Vishwanath Chakravarti gives the Saraswat Artha that, O Narad, you cannot be compared even to saints. And so apparently Daksha is saying that you're not a saintly person, but hidden meaning is he's saying that you're not a saintly person because you're even beyond comparison to the saints. Right? And you have shown the path of saintly progress to my sons. But both Prabhupada and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur note that they will not comment on the Saraswat Artha in the subsequent verses of Daksha in order to keep the commentary succinct. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu because he had executed such great austerities that Lord Vishnu had appeared before him. Nevertheless, he had a fault-finding mentality. He improperly thought Narad Muni to be a sadhu or non-saintly because Narad had foiled his intentions. Desiring to train his sons to become grahastha, fully equipped with knowledge, Daksha had sent them to execute austerities by Narayan Saras. Narad Muni took advantage of their highly elevated position and austerity and instructed them to become Vaishnavas. This is the duty of Narad Muni and his followers. They must show everyone the path of renouncing the world and returning back to Godhead. Further in the purport, we see that Srila Prabhupada, he personally relates to Daksha's criticism. This is a mood we will see recurring, that the criticism that is leveled by Daksha against Narad Muni, Srila Prabhupada also said that he has received the same criticism for training young boys and girls in Krishna consciousness. Right? So, as a follower of Narad Muni, he is also able to relate to the criticism that is leveled against Narad Muni. Verse 37. So this is the last verse. We'll stop after this. Raniyastrabir amuktanam anima mishta karmanam vigata shresha papa lokaya rubayo krata. Prajapati Daksha said, my sons were not at all freed from the three deaths. Indeed, they did not properly consider their obligations. O Narad Muni, O personality of sinful action, you have obstructed the progress towards good fortune in this world and the next because they are still indebted to the saintly person, the demigods, and their father. So, as Prabhupada noted in the previous words, that Daksha is a saintly person, meaning that he understands the scriptures. And he is essentially speaking from the scriptures. So in the purport, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives various quotes from the scriptures supporting the point that Narad Muni has given. So in the Vasishtha Dharma Shastra, it is said that the Brahmanas has three deaths by births: by Brahmacharyas, they repay the sages. By sacrifice, they repay the devas. And by producing offsprings, they repay the pitras. He who has sons performs sacrifices and observes brahmacharya life is free of debts. Right? And since the sons of Daksha had not done any of the three, they still had the debts. Then in the Manusmriti, it is said that having paid the three debts, the mind should enter into liberation. Not paying those debts and practicing from liberation, a person goes to hell. Right? So even though Daksha is a Kshatriya, he can also be considered in a category of Rajrishi. So Rajrishi are essentially Brahmanical Kshatriyas, right? So one can understand that Daksha, he was considering himself to be a Brahman because of his strict adherence to the Vedas. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that Daksha argued that although the renounced order is recommended for liberation, one cannot attain liberation unless one fulfills the obligation to the demigods, the saints, and the fathers. Right? And three methods are given: the demigods by yagyas, the rishis by adhyay, by studying the scriptures, and the fathers by having progeny. And all makes sense, right? The demigods, they survive by yagyas. The sages, they write the scriptures so that people can read it. And the pitras, they survive because of the oblations that are offered by the descendants. And then Prabhupada, of course, quotes this famous verse from the Bhagavatam, Deva Rishi Bhutanam Ranam Pitranam, where it's mentioned that everyone is indebted to demigods, to living entities in general, to family, to the pitas, and so on. But if one fully surrenders to Krishna Mukunda, who can give one liberation, even if one performs no yagyas, one is free from all debts. And so Prabhupada talks about this verse that he quotes often, that he talks about how the practice of bhakti, it frees one from this debt and all other debts. Right? These are the three fundamental debts, but then there are many, many other debts. In the various part of the scriptures, you will see many, many other debts. There's debt to the king, the debt to the king's wife, the debt to your guru, the debt to the society, debt to nature. So there are many, many debts that the person is born under, that they essentially, the whole life they live paying the debts. Right from the time they're born, they are under the burden of these debts, and the whole life they live to pay all these debts. Right? Otherwise, they are considered to be sinful. Right? But by the performance of bhakti, all the debts are considered to be paid off. Okay, so we will stop at this point. We just have a few verses in this chapter, which we will complete in the next discussion. And hopefully we'll start our next chapter, which is essentially just a lineage. So it's just a recitation of the chapter. We should be able to do that, complete that chapter also. Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hi, Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.